All right, your boy is back with a normalish face. Again, as normal as my face can be. 11.4, the growth of science and subjectivity. So I need a trash can around me to talk about this section because it's about science a lot, and I just, it's just everywhere. So I'll do my best. But actually, it's a pretty interesting unit because it's we're going to talk about some scientific figures and kind of the impact that they have on European society. So I think there's some cool stuff here that we can and we'll discuss, and a little bit of art. So, I mean, you see growth of science, you're like, woo, science, but there's art in here too. So it's kind of a catch-all to close out this section, the last one before World War I, which we are starting soon. Ugh, okay. All right. There's the menu. Let's do this. Okay, general trends. 2 plus 2, it depends. Like subjectivity, first of all, do you know what that word means? If you're objective or objective, the objective, there's always an answer, right? But subjective is opinion-based. You kind of see and interpret for yourself. So that's kind of where we're going. Following the revolutions, 1848. Again, 1848 is another change year. Europe's going to turn to a realist and materialist worldview. Materialist, like, I got to have things, right? Like, I've got like 20 hangers here. And realist. The dream that we talked about romanticism, dead, right? And now we're going to start looking at the world as what it is and having to deal with what we have in front of us instead of being motivated by dreams and visions and enlightenment freedoms and all that. Now we're going to be driven by what we see in front of us. A very Bismarckian view. Realpolitik is saying it's politics of reality. It's going to extend to art and intellectual thinking as well. Then, and this is really the seeds of the modern world, in the later 19th century, a new relativism in values and a loss of confidence in the objectivity of knowledge led to modernism in intellectual and cultural life. What does that mean? Your values are relative to who you are, where you're at, where you're going, who you are, where you're at, where you're going. You see what I'm saying? It's all relative to your situation. And there is a loss of confidence in what is held as true. So this is set against the backdrop of all this economic success that we've talked about already this unit with the bourgeoisie and new consumerism and the Belle Epoque and all this. But at its core, people are starting to question, like, what is all this even about? We're going to kind of see that as we go through. You're going to see a shift to the focus of irrationality and impulse instead of what's objective and fair and logic. Remember the Enlightenment? We're starting to shift a little bit toward a new way of thinking. And the challenges that those who believe that art should reflect something shared and idealized, such as beauty and patriotism, people are going to now start creating art to express their own individual viewpoints. So that is a huge change. Rather than we have a piece of art which is objective beauty, like the Mona Lisa or the Venus de Milo, or even Liberty Leading the People, an objective idea. Now we're going to shift into, here is a starry night, but it doesn't really look like night. What do you see in there, right? Because we are moving worldviews a little bit. So keep that in mind as we go through this section, is that we're turning to a more realistic, subjective, interpretive reality rather than 2 plus 2 equals 4 for everybody, and these dreams that move all of us in a certain direction. Now, we've seen this painting, Liberty Leading the People by Eugene Delacroix, showcasing the French Revolution, the July Revolution, July monarchy of 1830, and it is a romantic piece, right? Because it is showing the dream and the desire and passion to move France to a new direction. But as we know, in the year 1848, all your dreams died. A horrible death. Actually, in France, they did okay. But in most other places, those romantic-led revolutions failed. And after that, the art is going to reflect new ideas. Instead of showing what life could be, right, for these liberals and romantics who want change, now art's going to reflect what it is. And that's when we have the artistic movement called realism. In realism, you're going to see a lot of paintings of basically people just doing stuff, right? It's a realistic look in the world. There's another famous painting called The Gleaners. Actually, this might be The Gleaners. It's another one I'm thinking of where people are just like hitting rocks. I mean, it's like, okay, that's exciting. But like realism would be me like eating a ham sandwich or like me talking on my phone. Like, here's a painting right here, right? I mean, it's exciting, and you'll probably screenshot that and make fun of me, but that's okay. So realism, again, is showing things as they are. And for the Romantics, they were like, you know what? This world sucks. We can't leave these romantic revolutions. So here's basically just the way it is. Now, we do have a technological invention as we kind of develop realism that will shift what art is used for. Okay? We have the invention of the photograph. What am I talking about? Camera, that's the word I'm looking for, right? The camera's invention at around the year 1850, let's say, is going to make the need to show reality as it is kind of obsolete, right? Because now we can just take a picture of these ladies who are like, you know, gathering wheat. Now we're going to see art which will start to reflect what an individual person sees, and that's where we have Impressionism, okay? So while realism was a direct reaction to Romanticism, Impressionism builds off of Romanticism a little bit in that it's more of a gut reaction thing, right? It's what I see, right? That's my feeling, is that I look here and I see a bridge with all these lilies and, you know, this color and whatever. So Impressionists want to show their impression, their subjective view of the world, right? And that's where you're going to see paintings like this, right? And Claude Monet is probably the most famous impressionist, water lilies and sunflowers and these things. We eventually shift then into what's called post-impressionism. Do I have not? Okay, this is post-impressionism. You know this one, Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Like, you know, what exactly is this, right? We can figure out it's a night sky, but it's taken to a different level of subjective interpretation. So in art becoming more subjective, right? You see what you see, and it's up to everyone else to figure out what you're seeing, right? And what your interpretation is. Okay? Personal interpretation means more. We've already talked about that. And then a less emphasis on shared values in that not everybody sees night like this, right? So we're not going to share that objective view of what night is. Now everyone's going to see that differently. You know, first of all, like, what is this, right? I mean, some people aren't going to immediately say, oh, that's a tree, right? But I see that as a tree. You may see it as like the smoke monster from Lost or something. So it's all subjective for what you see, and that's what post-impressionism is. So as art has basically evolved over the years, it's become more and more subjective to where I'm going to like throw a bunch of paint up against a canvas and say, hey, look, that's like the Statue of Liberty. I mean, that don't make sense, right? Art today, I mean, what are you going to do? But so it's where it's become more and more subjective over time. That pattern has increased. And again, if we have a technology that shows us exactly what the world looks like, why do we need art and painting to reflect that? Now let's bring our own individuality into it. So again, subjectivity. Art's cool. Like, if you think about it, it's just really cool. So all right, let's talk about that already. Okay, there it is, post-impressionism. Okay. Hopper's right up there looking at me, judging me this whole time. Okay, so like I said earlier, realist and materialist worldview. Focus on what's in front of you. And with that comes kind of a renewed interest in science, because if you remember, the Romantics, not much on science, not much on logic. They wanted to take things kind of back to the way it was before all that science stuff kind of started to ruin the environment and the atmosphere with the Industrial Revolution. So with the realists coming in, into the second half of the 19th century, you're going to see more of an emphasis on science. So we're moving again away from this romantic era and now more of, you know what, here's how the world works. Here's what it is. It's right in front of us. So we got the growth of science. And in some circles, not everywhere, but you start to see in some circles that science replaces religion as the authority for life. And, oh, that guy's a winner. Look at him. Friendly guy. So you're going to see the white coat take over from the white collar or something. Whatever. So, again, science becoming the new authority over religion. This is huge, right? I'm going to circle this. The link, that is a poor circle, but you'll live with it. The link between science and quality of life is discovered. We talked about Edwin Chadwick and the sanitary ideas that if I clean up the streets, scientifically that's making a difference because these little bacteria things are like ruining everybody. And you get also in this, do I have the names? No. You also in this period are going to get a guy named Louis Pasteur, who creates pasteurization, of milk that you can basically eliminate those bacterium, create a better product, a safer product. You also have a guy named Joseph Lister, who Listerine, okay, if you know Listerine, will become named after. As again, these people are figuring out we can improve quality of life by investigating and researching science. Science doesn't now have to be now like, oh, Earth is in the center of the universe, or it's the sun. No, we can improve life as it is here in front of us. And it leads into the development of an idea, I believe, called positivism, a philosophy that science alone provides knowledge. It's not any of these objective natural rights. It's none of these like shared communal feelings. It's science, right? Science is going to bring us knowledge and enlightenment. And a name maybe to put down, just the last name here, is Auguste Comte, C-O-M-T-E. He was the father of positivism. Yeah. Comte. Okay, his first name was August, like the month. So, Comte. That's great. So, again, kind of a basic general overview there of science. Like knowledge. Hey, this guy, you've heard of him. You know what he thought of. He's had a hard life. I mean, he's seen some things, like some penguins in Galapagos Islands and such. Okay, so On the Origin of Species, 1859. Again, evolutionary biological theories, and there was another guy stole his ideas from. I get it. I know I've heard the story. But the theory of evolution is not, we don't have to explain what that is, right? That's not our purpose. But what it is important for us to understand is that how it impacts society. And we talked about how science is replacing religion as that authority. And Darwin's evolution is going to dispute a literal interpretation of the Bible. So if you take every word in the Bible for its word and say this is the exact way that it was, that there's no metaphor, there's no allegory in there, it's going to come into contact or conflict, right, with Darwin. So now we have a conflict brewing, again, that 11.3, we mentioned the syllabus of errors from the church is that, which way do you go? Do you go science, religion, right? Because now, whereas with Galileo and Copernicus, they were trying to explain God's creation back in the scientific revolution, now we're starting to split, right? Now we're starting to look at two totally different things. So it's something that I think that's worth considering. And then we've also, with imperialism, talked about social Darwinism and how the upper class and industrialists are going to love this because they're at the top of the food chain already. And they're like, of course we're the best, right? We're the most fit to survive. We're going to be cutthroat in our businesses because if we don't, we're going to go out of business, right? If I'm a store and I don't charge the right amount, if I don't do A, B, and C, my competitor is going to beat me up. So I better be strong enough to survive. So social Darwinism, not only in the business community, but also, like we talked about in imperialism, the nationalist community, and saying that if our country doesn't go out and conquer Djibouti or Wakanda, I haven't seen it yet, but I will, then we're going to fall apart. So we've got to go out and do that. So Darwinism, not only with a religious angle, but also with social Darwinism, is making a huge impact socially, culturally, just as much, I would argue, as in the scientific community. Okay? Here's another guy, Sigmund Freud. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a guy, right? I need one of these, right? A little, I need a little monocle or something up there, just be cool, right? Mr., give him a top hat. That's like a sombrero or something. That's not even nothing. Okay, let me erase that. Sorry, Sigmund. Okay, so Sigmund Freud, psychologist. Humans are irrational creatures. We don't make sense, right? We do things that are stupid. That is kind of his main thing. It is anti-enlightenment. It says, you know what? The Enlightenment says we make smart decisions, right? We make decisions through logic and reasoning. Freud says, nope, it's not a thing. So it's anti-enlightenment for sure. Not objective, right? We make subjective, opinion-based decisions. His big thing is that your personality is, well, I almost said screwed up. Maybe it is, but it's very complex, okay? You have 3 levels to your personality. Just a little insight into that. First of all, your ego, what people see, right? You all know my personality. I know your personality. That is our ego, right? That's what we see. We also have our super ego, which is our conscience, and that's, you know, it talks to us. It says you should do this, you should do that. It basically shoulds all of you, right? I mean, it's basically going to say, listen, that's that voice in your head, you know, the little angel or devil on your shoulder that says, do this, do that, right? So that's a part of your personality. And then, and this is kind of where the anti-enlightenment comes into play, your id, ID, your id. It is the part not subject to reason. You know, it's the part that says of your personality that does something that it's like, you know, 2 in the morning and you have a test at 8 a.m. and you're like, oh, I want to like binge Netflix, right? That doesn't make sense. Well, it depends on the show, but that doesn't make any sense. So your id is basically that instinctual part of you that's driving you to do stupid stuff. And Freud basically says all of these levels of your personality combine to make who you are. So this is a really good image to kind of showcase that, is that people see your ego and they can see the effect of your superego. Nobody sees your id, right? Nobody knows what's going on down there. And they don't want to. It's like that Bismarck quote, laws and sausages, you don't see how they're made. The same with your id. You don't want to kind of see how that works inside of you. So, and then also Freud develops our modern idea of psychotherapy, and also had the Oedipus complex. If you know anything about that, you know the whole thing. For Freud, everything was about sex. He believed that all men were in love with their moms. So you can kind of wrestle with that, guys, how you wish to. We can. All right, last big part here, the new physics. Okay, physics. I know some of you are going to take AP Physics down the road, and you're going to love every second of it. So here is kind of the foundation of that. I don't know why I'm an eraser. Eraser. Back to my pen. Okay. Now, back in the day, Isaac Newton. The universe was a big clock, right? Deist. Everything made sense. There were natural laws. Everything was put together. God's creation was perfect. It made sense. The new physics, or the new physicists, are going to come around the late 19th, early 20th century and start to challenge that belief of a very mechanistic, organized universe. Let me give you that word there. Mechanistic. That's a word that you're going to see a lot when it comes to Newton, and that also played very well in the Enlightenment with the deists, is that it's like a machine, it's like a clock, everything's structured perfectly. Now these guys are like, I just don't know about that. Marie Curie, a name you may have heard of, discovered some radioactive elements and ends up dying because of that. Again, seen, there's more to life than meets the eye. There's Marie Curie. Max Planck, quantum theory, unpredictability of energy and matter. You can't put limits or expectations on what matter and energy can do. He is just a cheery fellow. And then Albert Einstein, the theory of relativity. That time and space, how time works and how space works, is all relative to where you are in the universe. It all can be different based on what your perspective is. And a good example, explanation of that, and again, you do not have to know all these concepts. You just kind of have to know how this kind of applies to the bigger picture. So he really challenges the way that Newton saw, like, the laws of motion, universal gravitation, structure, and all these things that were true for everybody everywhere. Einstein's like, you know what? Maybe not. There's a thing called the twin paradox. If you don't know what that is, let's imagine you got a guy here, let's call him Larry on the left, and then Reginald on the right. And Larry gets into a spaceship, and like goes off into space and he travels at light speed and it's really awesome, and he's gone for Larry a period of like 20 years, okay? And Larry's like traveling and seeing everybody, and like there's Wally and there's Han Solo and there's Star Trek and there's everything else, and then Iron Man's there, hello Iron Man, and Thor and all these guys, and he travels at light speed, comes back 20 years later, and on Earth time has gone by quicker. Time has passed slower because he was going at a faster speed in space for Larry. That Reginald is a lot older back home, okay? Because time and space was relative. He, Larry, was going at a quicker pace, therefore time has passed more. Again, I'm fudging this, but the idea is that if where you're at can totally change the perspective of space and time. And that is subjectivity, right? That your perspective determines everything. And that's what Einstein's theory was, the theory of relativity, the twin paradox. It's fascinating stuff. I got a video, I'll post it. We can't really go through it in class, I think, this year, and I don't have time, but I'll put it on here. Kind of explain the twin paradox a lot better than I do. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson does it. It's really so again, it's how does this add to the subjectivity? You see, it's all relative to where you're at. So, to sum up, because we've been here a while, 19th century science's impact on thinking. How does science impact the way that Europeans think? Well, we've already seen it. New relativism and values. What's true for one people may be different for another. Excuse me. How you treat someone may be different based on who they are. Think imperialism. The loss of confidence in the objective and objectivity of knowledge is that maybe what we thought was true isn't really true, and that we need to look at it another time. That could be stressful, right? If you think something's true, like if you solve a math problem, you get the skill, and then all of a sudden your math teacher says, there's a different way of doing it, you fool. And you're like, oh, crap, right? Because, you know, math. So here's some burning questions to stress you out. Is religion right about science? Do we always make logical decisions? Have we figured out the universe? And the question is, what am I going to do with all this stress? Gosh, what if I just fight a world war? So the point here to close, as my battery's running low, is that the stress intellectually is going to play into the uncertainty moving forward. And the next time you see a Pideo, it's going to blow up. Everything we've discussed since Napoleon has been building to the moment that we're going to. And all of these isms are going to collide in a big mess called the war to win in all wars. I screwed up that last time. That's very sad. It's been 23 minutes. So, have a good day.